What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Joining me, once again, the better half of this podcast, Chris Fedor. First and foremost, Chris, how are you feeling? Are you getting back into the groove of things? You're starting to churn out articles like you're in mid-season form. What's going on?
Yeah, man, I'm trying. I'm trying to stay healthy, too. I'm still fighting this cold that I've been dealing with for a while, but it's much better than it was the other day when it basically knocked me on my ass. So it'll be good to have a little bit of a break. The Cavs have an extended break between preseason game number 2 and preseason game number 3. It allows me to do some feature writing, the reporting that I've already done on certain topics. But it's here, man. Like, it's crazy to me that the regular season is right around the corner and we're into training camp and we're into preseason games and it's just going to keep coming. It's going to be nonstop the rest of the way. So I've got no choice but to churn out more and more articles.
Time to get back into the win column when it comes to writing and all those different things, trying to be the best in the business. We already know you're the best reporter when it comes to the Cavs beat. I'm just trying to keep up.
I appreciate that.
But
You're too
Chris,
kind.
man, not even. But Chris, today we wanted to talk about some things that have been said around the league by national reporters and by NBA GMs. Today, I wanted to start with Donovan Mitchell, right? He is the engine of this team. He's the biggest name. He is the reason that the Cavs are going to be able to do what they do, along with being the reason that the expectations are much higher for this team than they were a couple of seasons ago. But when you talk to the NBA GMs around the league, this was a survey that's done every year, the 2024 NBA GM survey, that listed the best shooting guards in the NBA. Donovan Mitchell did not receive a vote. Obviously, this list is a little wonky just because of who they consider to be a shooting guard in this list. I'm going to read it off for you. Number 1, Anthony Edwards, Minnesota Timberwolves. He got 33% of the votes. He's listed as the top shooting guard in the NBA. Devin Booker, Phoenix Suns, 23%. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Oklahoma City Thunder, 20%. He got 20%. Stephen Curry, Golden State Warriors, 10%. Luka Doncic, Dallas Mavericks, 7%. And also receiving votes, both from the Boston Celtics, Jaylen Brown and Derek White were also in this mix. Last year, the top shooting guard in the NBA was Devin Booker with 63% of the votes. So a wide margin, this time being a little bit closer. Chris, what do you think about Donovan not getting the kind of talk that we expected for him to get when it came into this season, especially from NBA GMs around the league?
First of all, who classifies Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a shooting guard and not a point guard? When was the last time Stephen Curry was a shooting guard? Like, what? And Luka? A shooting guard? Like, I understand, like, if others receiving votes want to toss Jaylen Brown in there. He had a really good playoff run, finals MVP, the things that he accomplished last year for Boston. I think there's a belief from people around the NBA that, you know, if he was in a different spot, he could be the alpha, right? And he could be putting up numbers very similar to Ant and Devin Booker. But because he's on the Boston team, and it's more of a team thing, he kind of blends into the fabric of what they need out of him. And he kind of goes to the background just because he also plays with Jason Tatum. I get the Jaylen Brown thing. Derek White, like, who in the world thinks Derek White is a better, more impactful basketball player than Donovan Mitchell? Like, could you imagine Derek White being the number 1 on a team? Could you imagine him being the face of a franchise, the focal point of an offense, the engine of an like, what are we doing here? I don't understand the disrespect for Donovan Mitchell. It baffles me that coming off of 2 career years since he came to Cleveland, one of those where he started as the Eastern Conference All-Star, another one where he was in the MVP conversation. It baffles me that he doesn't get the kind of recognition that he has earned throughout the course of his career. And you could sit there and you can say that one of the things missing from his resume is playoff success, deep postseason runs. I get that. That's fine. Like, you can definitely hold that against Donovan, and you can say that that's something that keeps you from putting him higher on these top 10, top 15 rankings. But it's not like these other people that also received votes for the best shooting guard in the NBA have had massive success in the playoffs as well, right? Did Shai Gilgeous-Alexander get to the conference finals and I missed it? No. So I get some of these. I totally do. Like, there's a legitimate argument of Anthony Edwards and Devin Booker. And if you want to put Anthony Edwards 1 and Devin Booker 2, or Devin Booker 1 and Anthony Edwards 2, I'll gladly take the third pick if it's Donovan Mitchell, right? Like, I just don't think you can go wrong with either guy. I think it's splitting hairs between them. But beyond those two guys, no, I don't see it. Like,
Yeah,
Donovan is one of the most impactful players in the NBA. He has proven that over the course of his career. And I just don't understand the disrespect for him.
Yeah, and like I said to begin to kind of preface this, these lists are wonky, right? Because I believe
Yeah.
Luka Doncic got votes for 3 different categories. like Luka Doncic is listed as the best point guard in the NBA through this NBA GM survey with 37%. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is second in 30%. Stephen Curry is 23%. He's third on this list. So they're classifying them as 2 different position players. And then you go down to small forward, and Luka Doncic is tied for third or tied for second on this list with 17%. Like, I get it that Luka is one of the best players in the NBA right now, but like, to take away from the other players and not be able to classify these guys as to what they are, like, sure, if you want to say that Luka is a point guard and switches off with Kyrie at shooting guard, I can understand that. That is manageable. Saying he's a small forward, like, that's just unrealistic. He might try and guard some small forwards, but he's not successful at that. But back to the original point, where we're talking about Donovan Mitchell, what he's been able to do. And I've had this conversation with Jimmy Watkins on this podcast a lot, and it's like, what more does he have to do to get the recognition, to get the accolades, to get these kinds of things? We know he's going to be set up for an all-star caliber season. We think that he's going to be in the running for an MVP nod for this. Also, he didn't get any votes for that, if people were wondering, when it came to MVP votes from the NBA GM survey. That was led by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Jason Tatum. So I think it's really interesting, right? Because I talked about it on a different podcast where we discussed how important Donovan is to this team and how much he knows how to make everybody around him better, right? And knows how to empower guys on the roster to get them to the next level. Because, like Chris said, one of the blemishes on his record is not being able to get further into the playoffs. And to do that, he's not a player that can just take everybody by himself. He can lead, he can bring people up, but it takes the entire roster to get there.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I sometimes struggle with too, Ethan, is we understand playoff success and we understand winning a championship in any team sport is a measure of a team against another team. So are we holding it against Donovan Mitchell that the Utah Jazz that he played for at that time like wasn't as good as some of the other teams that they were playing against? That's unfair to me. And yeah, I know they had a bunch of regular season success, but I think everybody looked at that roster and said, yeah, there are some flaws there. Yeah, there are some limitations there. Yeah, we think this team is better. We think this team is better. I don't know how many people picked the Jazz to win the NBA championship. Any of those? How many people did? Like, that wasn't the expectation for them, right? So we're holding that against Donovan, that he didn't get that team to the NBA Finals. And then we're holding it against Donovan that, since coming to Cleveland, he hasn't been able to get them to the NBA Finals, when there are a lot of things with this roster that need to be worked out. There's a lot of things with the coaching staff that might have left some things to be desired, right? And like, beyond that, Ethan, it's not like Donovan hasn't had big moments in the playoffs. Like, are you kidding me? Like, multiple series across multiple teams, this dude has been playoff Mitchell, playoff Spida. You know what I'm saying? And like, yes, there have been shortcomings. Guess what? LeBron has failed in the playoffs too, right? The best of the best have failed in the playoffs too. But like, at one point, there were all these conversations about playoff Spida, and rightfully so. Every single playoffs that he has been a part of, he's averaged at least 20. In one of the playoff series, he averaged 36. Another one was 32. This past year with the Cavs, before he was dealing with that knee injury, he looked like one of the best players and one of the most impactful players in the NBA. And people were like, whoa, this is a different dude here. Like, Orlando has nothing, right? Boston has nothing for this guy. And going into that series against Boston, there were conversations. Hey, do they have guys that can match up with Donovan and make things difficult on Donovan? And look at all these different defenders. Drew Holiday, really, really good defender. Derek White, really, really good defender. And before he was dealing with that knee injury, I mean, he was to a different level. He was playing like an MVP candidate again. You know what I'm saying? So like, it would be one thing if we looked at his entire resume and we said no playoff success from a team standpoint, and just like kept coming up short also on the playoff stage from an individual standpoint. But like, that's not who he's been throughout the course of his career. That's certainly not who he was last year for the Cavs, when they were, competing with Orlando and competing with Boston. Like, the reason that went 7 against Orlando, that wasn't about Donovan coming up short, or Donovan not holding his own, or Donovan not carrying his weight. It was about the rest of the roster. It was also about Jarrett Allen missing a bunch of time because he was dealing with that pierced rib. So I just like, I just don't understand why Donovan, in some cases, is held to a standard that we don't hold other people like in those same tiers to.
And I mean, like, I don't know if Donovan cares about what media or what
Oh, he
anybody
does.
really. What do you
Oh, he does. Yes. Yes.
think?
Absolutely, he does.
I know he keeps tabs, but I don't know. I don't know if this is like, okay, let me put up the article in my locker and make sure that I'm going after this for the entire season. Like that's something I've seen done before, where it's like players are like so invested in proving people wrong that they'll be like, okay, you prove that wrong. Prove that wrong. I don't know if Donovan is to that level, but I know he keeps tabs on things that have been said. Especially, I mean, this takes us back to the Team USA conversation when he tweeted about it himself, talking about like just laughing emojis about him not being in the conversation for 2028. I mean, I
Oh,
you know him much better
Ethan.
than I do, but
Ethan. He was pissed at me for an entire summer because I didn't have him on first team All NBA one year. Um, these are the kinds of things. Look, this is a guy who believes that like he has the ability and the talent to be the face of the NBA when LeBron and Steph and KD and all those guys move on. This is a very prideful guy. This is a very confident guy. These slights that he continues to get, and he gets them, right? Didn't make first team All NBA. That bothered him immensely. The fact that he was not part of this past Olympics, yes, of course, that bothered him. The fact that he didn't finish top 5 in MVP voting the year and he finished 6th, that bothered him. This is something, oh my God. He takes pride in being an elite shooting guard in the NBA. And to have a list and to have general managers, like guys who are considered really, really smart and do this for a living, and they're supposed to understand the game at the highest level and be able to evaluate talent at the highest level. To have a list of the best shooting guards in the NBA, Donovan's position, and have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 players on that list who got at least one vote as the best at that position, and him not be of those 7, he is fully aware of that. Like, as much as he's celebrating the New York Mets right now, and of course he's going to, and that's like where his mind is, like World Series, Mets, World Series, bring on the Padres, bring on the Dodgers. He is fully aware of this list. Many people in his circle have made him aware of this list, and I don't know if he's going to come out and address it specifically, but I guarantee you this: there will be a moment at some point this season where Donovan passive aggressively makes mention of where he stands in the eyes of people at the shooting guard spot in the NBA. Mark my words. Put this on record, clip this thing, and save it for later, because that, my friend, is going to happen.
He is definitely known to make some passive aggressive comments. That is very fair. I like sometimes I know guys can be like just jokesters and make those, but to know that that really
Mhm.
like means something to Donovan, like that's a good thing. But that also shows like the importance of what I was getting at a little bit earlier is just how he's being able to deviate and being able to give away responsibility as well while trying to make these emphases for himself when it comes to different conversations, when it comes to different debates. And obviously, there are going to be nights where Donovan Mitchell is like, all right, give me the ball, everybody get out of the way, or set it up for me to get
Mhm.
the ball, set up schemes for me to get the ball and be successful because I want to show you guys something, and not necessarily showing anything to the Cavs or the Cavs staff because they already know who he is, but reminding people who are going to be at the games. Like if it's an ESPN game, like last year I had a thing, everybody's like, Ethan, why are you dressed up? I said, it's a TV game. Like Donovan might show out a little bit more on during those games when it comes to just national coverage, people getting to see
Mhm.
him and getting the respect that we believe that he deserves. Because Donovan Mitchell, by far, is one of the top 15 best players in the NBA. So if you're going to say that there's top 7 shooting guards
Mhm.
ahead of him, that kind of
Yeah.
skews that list a little bit when you're talking about players, even if we're talking about them having them in different categories and being very confusing when it comes to these rankings. But I just think it's so interesting to see how Donovan Mitchell has managed his stardom, has managed how he is represented not only his own brand, but the team's brand, and continue to lift everybody else up rather than being like, well, it wasn't my fault we lost. Like I think
Mhm.
that is one of the best qualities about Donovan Mitchell and how he's handled his career to this point.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Ethan, is his leadership and the way that he elevates teammates and teams that he goes to. Like, that's not for everybody. Not everybody has that ability to do that. You know what I'm saying? And for somebody like him to make the playoffs every single season that he's been in the NBA, that says something. That says something about his impact on winning. Yes, it says that, some of these franchises were well run and they put the right pieces in place and da 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 da. But it also says something about his impact on winning. And that to me can't get lost when measuring these individual players.
And I think it's just going to continue, right, Chris? Like, this is preseason. We're talking about these rankings in preseason. Donovan is going to
Yeah.
be looking for any survey that comes out, especially depending on what happens with this roster at the trade deadline. Like, hey, where were you when you were saying this about me? I want to see what
Yeah.
you're saying now after I put up these kind of numbers to begin. Because if the Cavs can create a three-headed offensive monster that allows Evan Mobley to be successful, Darius Garland to get his shots up, and then defenses don't feel like they can just take away Darius Garland and ultimately being like, okay, Donovan Mitchell, you're gonna have to do it by yourself. That is gonna open up so much room, space, and just effectiveness for Donovan Mitchell in something that he hasn't had in his first 2 seasons with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I think it's just going to be so interesting to see not only when if Darius Garland is able to have his bounce back season on top of Evan Mobley having a potential breakout year, but how Donovan Mitchell is like standing at the pinnacle, like, I just been waiting for y'all to act right and get to business, because this is the trifecta that they've needed to not only help him take away pressure when it comes to defenses, but also like, hey, I will happily give it to you and have 10 assists tonight at the same time. That'll not only boost my
Hmm.
stats, boost my standings, but it'll make you feel a lot better about yourself at the same time.
Hmm. And that's how he is. That's how he's always been. He prides himself on that. He doesn't like some of the narratives that have started surrounding him. And I think I don't know exactly how he's going to say it passive aggressively, but I'm guessing it's going to be something along the lines of, "Guess I'm not good enough. Guess I have to do more." Something along those lines. I bet that's how he's going to approach it, because I think that's how he feels. Like, he looks at this situation and he says, "What else do you want from me? Like, what else do I have to do to show it to you? What else do I have to prove?" And again, like, the glaring thing on his resume is team success in the playoffs. And he understands, Ethan. He understands the importance of Darius Garland and Evan Mobley to that. Um, he knows that this is an NBA where one guy cannot drag a team to the NBA Finals by themselves. Just can't do it. Not in today's NBA. Not the way that different teams are made up, especially in the Eastern Conference. So if the Cavs are going to have the success that they want to have, yeah, it starts with Donovan. He is the leader of this team. He's the offensive engine of this team. He's the MVP candidate of this team. But he needs Darius and Evan specifically to get close to that same level of readiness when it comes to competing on the playoff stage against the likes of whoever it may be: Philadelphia, Boston, Milwaukee, Indiana, New York, something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, Donovan, as we've mentioned multiple occasions in the last 2 seasons with the Cavs, he's had career years. Like last year, he had a career high in assists and rebounds. Obviously, he was able to get the points in where he needed to, but around the margins, he's not only making the other players better, but he's making himself better and playing to a role.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he bumps his 6.1 assists up to 8 or 9 this season if he's making the dishes that he was in the preseason. Obviously, one game, not very small sample size, all those things, but the
Mm-hmm.
joy that they were playing with, the the Donovan Mitchell was able to drive to the lane and just hand it off to Evan Mobley
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Here you go, silver platter, and I know you're gonna make this bucket." Like, there was
Yeah.
no hesitation, no like, I have to do it myself. Again, small sample size, but it just felt like the offense in the first quarter especially was flowing to the point where everybody was doing what they needed. Chris wrote about it in an article that came out yesterday, about how Darius and the offense were taking threes early into the shot clock, transition offense, how that's going to impact them. It's just so important for them to not only be so trusting with each other, which is why this core group and bringing back so much continuity is great for this
Mm-hmm.
roster, but it also is just going to unlock so many different things. And that's the one thing that Chris mentioned yesterday that caught my attention again. Kenny Atkinson saying, hey, we haven't shown you everything. We got some
Right.
things in store. And that should make Cavs fans and people that are just trying to figure out what's going to happen this season excited based on the success that they had early on in the first game of the preseason.
Yeah, because that's what Kenny was talking about earlier today, Ethan, is that, they've been so focused on certain areas of this team and in ways that they can enhance this roster and improve in areas where Kenny believes improvements can be made. And because they've been so focused on those things, there hasn't been as much time for some of the other stuff. Like, he's not trying to overload these guys. He's trying to make it a pointed approach, a targeted approach to these are the things that matter the most. These are the things that we're trying to instill in you. These are the principles offensively and defensively. Let's master these. Let's focus on these. And then as the season continues to go on, and it's funny because he's been talking about these growing pains with Evan Mobley and the way that he's going to be used and how it's not the most comfortable or how it's not the way that he's been used throughout the course of his NBA career. But I think as a whole, the Cavs could go through growing pains. I think Kenny Atkinson could go through growing pains as a coach, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what fits this roster, what doesn't fit this roster. And I think he's looking at this saying, all right, let's focus on these specific areas first, and then we'll continue to evolve as the season goes on. And yes, the regular season matters. Yes, wins are going to matter. Yes, if we start falling behind in the race in the East, it could get dicey because getting a top 6 seed might take 50 wins. But we understand that the regular season is also going to be an evolution for us so that we can figure out, like, who we can be, what things we can go to, and all those different things. And I just don't think there's enough time for a new coach to do that right now with the preseason going on, with training camp going on. So some of those things are going to have to be figured out in the regular season. And I think that's okay. I think that has to be a realistic expectation.
Kenny has also talked about like at an abundance his time in Brooklyn and taking from that experience and being at the top of the pedestal now as the head coach and having to adjust again from being an assistant coach to a head coach,
Mm-hmm.
and after being with Steve Kerr and Ty Lue and all of those big name guys, but taking away from those different aspects of things that he learned, and implementing them. But obviously we've talked about lip service a lot on this podcast, and lip service goes only as far as that is. Sometimes action needs to be taken to show and figure out what is going to be in those situations, and like when
Right.
those hard conversations are going to have to be had, is Kenny Atkinson going to be able to do it in the right ways, and is he going to be able to implement what he wants while also uplifting the player or being realistic with the expectations? And I
Right.
just think it's going to be a difficult thing. But Chris, I wanted to wrap up on more of a fun note because you mentioned Donovan Mitchell, and him celebrating the New York Mets win and them getting into the NLCS. He apparently posted on Twitter recently, was just on FaceTime with his dad who works in the Mets organization as they're celebrating, and he's celebrating with them over FaceTime and having conversations like that. It's just like moments like that where you're so enveloped in the moment and you get to celebrate not only with your dad who you love and adore and all those different things, but like to be a part of that. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really special and just motivating when it comes to wanting to get there yourself.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Donovan's love for the New York Mets runs really, really deep. Was wearing a jersey last night in the locker room. I mean, this is a dude who is hanging on every single moment of the New York Mets season, and you love to see that passion. And Donovan has that same passion. for other sports teams that he follows as well. And it just goes to show like how much of a sports junkie this dude is. Like he is watching regular season baseball games. He is watching the Dallas Cowboys on the weekends when the NFL is going on. It's one of the things that I think makes Donovan such a good fit on this roster and such a good leader, right? He's so personable. He's so engaging. He's relatable. You know what I'm saying? Like he tries to involve other people in these different things that he's interested in or that he goes to do. Doesn't seem like there's that many other New York Mets fans in the Cavs locker room, but like the jokes that they lob toward Donovan and the crap that they give him because of his over the top fandom is something that does bring a team together, right? It does bring players together. It's a commonality in a different kind of way. And even last night in the locker room, Darius was giving Donovan stuff about just how over the top he is and how right now his fandom is at an all-time high, but he's going to be insufferable if the Mets get to the World Series. So like all those different things, like you can just see how much he loves his Mets and how much the guys in that locker room, like in some way or another, like are a part of that journey with Donovan one way or another.
For those fans that are wondering what jersey Donovan Mitchell was wearing last night, it was a Robin Ventura jersey, and it looked like it
Yeah,
had like patching on it from
it
like
did. From the
playoffs.
2000 World Series.
Yeah, that like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
like the authenticity of like if you listen to this podcast, you know I'm a baseball junkie as well. So I'm over here
Yeah.
like, oh my God, where did you get the jersey? Did your dad get you the jersey? Blah blah blah, blah. Like having side conversations. But to Chris's point about just the camaraderie that is being built and how they're able to joke with Donovan and all those things, like Darius Garland is also a big baseball guy. Two guys that thought
Yeah.
their life was going to be baseball instead of basketball and turned to basketball, and now they're in the NBA. And Donovan and Darius were, it seemed like, at the Guardians game together when they went against the Detroit Tigers a couple of days ago. And it's just building a relationship, building a trust, building a bond. And I mean, this Cavs team has talked about the Paris trip at an abundance and how that helped them last season. Donovan Mitchell referenced it to a reasoning why he wanted to come back to the Cavs in the first place and how much chemistry they built. And it's also a big reason why this Cavs organization wanted to go to Sarasota, Florida, and go to IMG Academy for training camp. Because you get away, you're not necessarily going home. You're going to a hotel with the players that you were just at practice with, having dinner, lunch, whatever, then activities afterwards. Like Chris has talked about on a different podcast about how they were hitting the biodegradable golf balls into the lake or whatever that was near them. Like it's just this team is so tight knit. And I've said it before. I think this is one of the most tight knit teams in the NBA, and I feel like it's going to be one of the reasons that they make it further than they did last year because of how much they grew. If this is the same roster that they have after the trade deadline, but Chris, gonna wrap up. Is there anything you want to hit us with before we dip out?
No, I don't think so. Just get ready for preseason game number 2, man.
Indiana Pacers coming at you, and they're going to be coming fast. All right. With that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. We'll be giving you analysis and updates during the game, some that you won't see on X, formerly Twitter, throughout tomorrow's preseason game on Subtext. So, to get this information, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.